Okay, I wasn't losing it. They're up there.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
So, wait, but I hand it to you afterwards first,
No,
so y'all have your own.
have our own.
Never mind. See, I was wrong.
Okay,
We have our own.
we were just following each other,
Yeah.
blind mice.
Hello.
Hello, girl.
Okay. You ready? Yeah. Good morning, everybody. We're going to start in just a second. Hi. I'm Mackie Moore, and I'm one of the steering committee of Silence is Not an Option, and we welcome you today, and thank you so much for your support. Before we get started, just wanted to let you know that after we do the lecture and the question and answer, we thought it might be neat to all kind of line up out front, and some people have signs, and just stand out there in solidarity for 10 minutes on Meeting Street. Just as our group before we move on to other protests. So that's the plan. And then secondly, if there is anybody who is feeling any trepidation about going to North Charleston for whatever reason, if you'll see me afterwards, we are going to do a pop-up protest at Customs House. And we can only do 24 people, but if we have more people than that, then a group can also do King at Market, which is a really, really hot spot. We wanted to have some representation downtown today. So that was our thinking, although we encourage everybody to go to North Charleston if you can, because there's safety in numbers and there's power in numbers. So anyway, thank you all for being here today. I want to introduce now Armin Dorfner and Susan Dunn, who are both civil rights attorneys, and they are going to be giving us a lesson on the Constitution today. So welcome.
So how we're going to do this is Armin is going to start. He's going to talk for a while, and I might ask him a couple of questions if he confuses me. And then I will talk for a while, and then afterwards we will open it up to your questions, and we'll do our best to answer them, although the Constitution covers a multitude of sins, so no telling if we can. And as you'll gather, they're not really clear answers on a lot of things, which is why lawyers exist. It gives us a job. But I think it's important to kind of understand the framework and to also understand why it's important for you to know about it. That this is not something that you delegate to the experts, but it's something that's very important that the citizenry has their arms around. So I'll introduce myself very briefly. I've been an attorney here in Charleston since '77. I was a street lawyer, which meant I did whatever anybody paid me to do for a long time. And then the end of my working career, I was the legal director for the ACLU for the state. So I've worked in this area, but I've also worked not in this area as just a regular old lawyer. And I'm nowhere near as accomplished as Armin, so I'll pass it on to Armin.
Thank you, Susan, and thank you all for being here. I know there's a lot of people who have been longtime friends of mine, and if I could see better, I'd recognize you. So if I don't say hello, you know it's my eyes. Susan asked me to come and talk today, and I'm really happy to see this bright-eyed group of people. She asked me to talk about the Constitution. And you all know a lot about the Constitution. Some of you probably know more about it than I do. But what I want to talk about briefly is what the Constitution is supposed to do, and a little bit about what it has been doing or people have been doing to it in the last just little while. So, this is the Constitution. It's a little booklet. Hugo Black used to carry it around in his pocket all the time. And so I try to carry it around in my pocket. I'm not Hugo Black, but I'm figuring if I put it in my pocket, maybe the good parts of it will flow through and inspire me. Okay, the basic point about our Constitution, and remember this, our Constitution has a lot of wonderful things in it. There are also some problems with it, and some ways in which it can be used in ways that may not have been what it was intended to do. Remember this, our Constitution is close to the first founding document for a nation. Many constitutions have been written since ours was written in the 1780s. We are proud, and rightly proud, of it, but the fact that it's so old doesn't necessarily make it the best. If you have a house on the street and you were the first house that got indoor plumbing, you can be rightly proud of that, but your indoor plumbing system might not be as good as the plumbing systems that came along later when technology had advanced and people knew a little bit more. So we need to be somewhat measured in pride of the origin of our Constitution. Well, let's talk about it. Our Constitution basically is supposed to divide up powers. It was designed to create a country with no king, and that's especially interesting today with the no kings idea. So in order to avoid the power of a king, we had the separation of powers and something also called the division of powers. The idea was to spread the power out in many different places. So we have an executive branch, we have a legislative branch, we have a Supreme Court, we also have the states. So all these different institutions are supposed to spread out the power. Part of the problem is we now have a situation in which, for some reason, that does not seem to be working too well. So, for example, we have a president, okay? The president has been, the office of the president has been accumulating power for many, many decades or generations even. And taking that power away from other branches of the government. This is not the first president to have done so, even if it seems to be more extreme. But for example, Congress has the power to declare war. The president does not have the power to declare war. Okay, if you think back to our lifetime, some of us are old enough to have been born before World War II began, but since that time we've had excuse me, the Korean War, the Vietnam War, Iraq War I, Iraq War II, Afghanistan. We've had many different wars. When is the last time that Congress declared war in this country? Anybody know?
World War II.
Exactly, December 8th, 1941. Since that time, all those other wars, or police actions, or whatever you want to call them, have been done by the executive branch without Congress declaring war. Okay, so we have a president now who is seeking to exert an extraordinary power without paying any attention to the other branches. Theoretically, Congress is supposed to be a restraining power. The president only gets to carry out the laws that Congress passes. Well, this president seems to be exercising powers that Congress should have, whether it's rescinding appropriations that Congress has made, whether it's paying, using money that Congress hasn't appropriated, all kinds of things. But Congress is not doing anything about it. Congress is not saying, well, these are our powers and you can't do this. So Congress is not exercising its power. We have a Supreme Court that is supposed to be a check as a judicial branch, and back more than 200 years ago we had the decision of Marbury versus Madison, which said that the president can't and the Congress can't do things that violate our basic Constitution. Excuse me. the, uh, the, the Supreme Court has two kinds of functions. It has original jurisdiction, that is deciding cases that come straight to the Supreme Court. Those are very rare. They're cases about ambassadors or foreign countries, et cetera. It also, everything else, according to the Constitution, everything else is part of the appellate jurisdiction. So the appellate jurisdiction means the case starts in the district court, goes to the intermediate court, and then after a number of judges have looked at a case and fleshed out what the issues are, then the Supreme Court is supposed to exercise its supervisory power. In fact, the very first case that we learned about in high school, Marbury versus Madison, was a case where the Supreme Court said, this law is unconstitutional because it's trying to make the Supreme Court exercise original jurisdiction when it ought to be only appellate. So in that sense, the question is, when does the Supreme Court step in? Well, it's very rare for the Supreme Court to step into a case on the theory that it's an emergency before the lower courts have fully fleshed it out. It happens almost never. Sometimes in a death penalty case, the court may put a stay in for several days. Other extraordinary cases. In the past 6 months, this Supreme Court has 16 times, I counted them one day, I counted 16 times that this Supreme Court has stepped in before the lower courts have fully fleshed out the case to allow the president to fire people, to spend money, to hold up money, to do all kinds of things that arguably the president is not supposed to be able to do. So the Supreme Court isn't exercising its checks and balances. Its ability to have the separation of powers means something. The states, they're supposed to do something. So when the Justice Department says, we want all of South Carolina's voting records, we want to see all the, not just the names and addresses of all the voters, we want their Social Security numbers, we want the names, addresses, and Social Security numbers of everybody who's worked at the polls. You would think that the states would say, wait a second, don't trench on the state's ability to run our own elections. Instead, we have our governor and our legislature saying, whatever you want, we're here to do it. So the problem of today, seems to me, is that the Constitution is only as good as the people who make it work do it. And if they are not doing their jobs, the question is there something that we can do to help make them do their jobs? I think that's the question of the day. Here we are.
So let me ask you a question that I know is on the minds of some of the people here, which is does the Constitution really do anything to separate the use of law enforcement or the military in domestic settings? Is there anything in the Constitution that deals with that?
Yeah, of course. The Constitution says that, first of all, the Constitution says that the federal government can do certain things, but it can't override the states. The states have the power to. The National Guard, National Guard these are state agencies that should be under state control. The president has the power in emergency situations to federalize the National Guard. That was done by President Eisenhower when there was race rioting, white rioting in Little Rock, Arkansas, and he sent troops. He sent the paratroopers to Little Rock in a truly emergency situation. There is nothing in the Constitution that gives the federal government the power to simply turn every state into a staging ground for federal troops. You would think that the basic division between the federal government and the states would say something about that.
So could you give us just a thumbnail description of what the philosophy of originalism is and what it's doing in the Supreme Court and to the Constitution?
Originalism has a role, it seems to me. I mean, originalism is the fundamental values that are reflected in something like the First Amendment, freedom of speech, or the protection of property, all those things. You're supposed to carry through the philosophy, but you can carry originalism way too far. To me, it's a little, in some cases, it's a little bit like asking, if Thomas Jefferson were alive today, would he prefer a PC or a Mac? You're trying to decide present questions by reference to something that can't answer them. And so, for example, gun control. For 100 years, the Second Amendment was thought to involve was thought to be about the militia, not to create an individual personal right to carry guns. And that had been decided again and again by the Supreme Court. In 2008, I guess it was, the Supreme Court decided differently. They decided that the Second Amendment says a well-regulated militia being essential for the security of a free state, comma, the right to keep and bear arms should not be infringed. The Supreme Court basically took out that whole first half and said that's just a preamble, and preambles don't count. And if you think I'm overdoing that, go read Justice Scalia's majority opinion. He says it's a preamble, preambles really don't matter. So they just read that first half, including the part about the security of a free nation. So that's a way of taking originalism and making it a weapon, not an aid to interpreting a document that's supposed to serve us for hundreds of years.
Do you see that originalism has in some cases been used as an excuse to ignore precedent?
Yes, I mean, that's the case. As I say, the Second Amendment for 150 years was thought not to create an individual personal right to bear arms. Let me answer a slightly different question. The interesting question, when you come to the 15th Amendment, which is being shredded now, which is the right to vote without regard to race, the Supreme Court is basically shredding the 15th Amendment on the theory that the 14th Amendment overrides the 15th Amendment. So the original argument for the 15th Amendment has disappeared. The problem is that originalism, it's not so much that originalism by itself can go too far, it's wielded when it matters and not when it doesn't matter. Let me try another one. Here's one. In the the Dobbs decision that got rid of a woman's right to choose. The key part of that decision was, what does liberty mean? The Constitution protects life, liberty, and property. And so the majority opinion talked about what is liberty, what was liberty at the time of the Constitution 1789, let's say. One of the main sources of what they thought liberty was Justice Matthew Hale. I think it was remember him? Matthew Hale was an English judge in the 17th century who tried, tried and convicted 6 women for being witches, all of whom were burned at the stake. Well, what does liberty mean for women? In 1789, women had virtually no liberty. They had no rights in divorces, in child custody, in criminal cases. They certainly couldn't vote. So women's liberty really didn't begin a little bit in 1920 with the 19th Amendment, but really not till the 1970s. It wasn't until the 1970s that the Supreme Court ever struck down a state law for discriminating against women. Until that time, women had been kept off juries with Supreme Court approval. They'd been kept out of professions, out of jobs. There was not a single...
Denied credit cards.
Pardon me?
Denied credit cards.
Right. So the notion of defining liberty for women under the Constitution by going back to Matthew Hale, instead of recognizing that liberty by the time of the Roe decision meant something very different, that's just using originalism as a sinister device rather than a genuine aid to enforcing the Constitution.
Okay, so I'll talk a little bit now. Well, no, I'm going to ask one more. Tell everybody about the 26th Amendment case that's pending now. This is a funny case.
The 26th Amendment case. It's a case.
Wait a minute. 26th Amendment. Anybody?
Somebody. What'd she say?
And actually, it's the amendment that lowered the voting age to 18.
Right. The 18-year-old vote. It was, and it also says no age discrimination in voting. So the 15th Amendment says no race discrimination in voting, and the 19th Amendment says no sex discrimination in voting, and the 26th Amendment, which said 18-year-old vote, also says no age discrimination in voting. So South Carolina and a couple of other states have laws that say absentee voting, you can vote absentee if you meet a couple of qualifications, if you're Army or out of the county, or if you're over 65, you don't need an excuse. So I can vote absentee without an excuse. Many of you can, I'm sure. Those of you who will admit to being 65. But it's an out-and-out age discrimination. So it seems to be a law that's absolutely unconstitutional, and a case against it, there's no way to lose it, except that we've lost it 9 times in a row in other courts. But now, the case is now pending in the Fourth Circuit because we lost it in the district court, which followed the other courts and said, well, if they decided this. And I've been thinking that, well, maybe we have a decent chance to win, until the president recently said all absentee voting should be thrown out. So.
Yeah, so we might win that way with them saying, okay, nobody gets it.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can win too big. Okay, I'll give you some thoughts now. And part of what I wanted to focus on was really what difference it matters what you think, and in terms of the Constitution. And part of the critical thing here is the determination of what a person is. You know, when the Constitution was written, persons were really white men, or white men who owned land. That was the idea, and it carried for a while. But eventually, there was a determination that black men were also persons. Forget children, forget women, forget the Native Americans, but black men and white men are people. Then gradually, very, very slowly, women became included in that definition. And how did that happen? Some of that happened because we as a culture grew and changed. And some of that is a horse that's out of the barn, that you can't go back. There is no going back to women not being citizens. There's no going back to black people not being citizens. Once you get through that, then you've got a certain power that informs the time that it informs what the Constitution is doing. because we have changed, and the document sort of has to change with us in some ways. And I think that that's also the sort of ticklish sort of thing about human sexuality, which over time, that has changed as well. Our understanding and our appreciation, and that we now know that gay people are in fact human, just as human as anybody else. Eventually, we will understand that trans people are human and just as human as anyone else. And we're going to go to people, some people are sort of in between. We can't put them in a box at all. And they are still human, and they are still deserving equality under the law. At bit by bit, when you make this move as a community, it changes the context. It changes the lens, and it does make a difference. It does make a difference. It may be slow, but if you look over that history, the slow work of insisting that humanity in its full complexity is recognized is our work. It's our work to bring it out and to articulate it anywhere and everywhere that we can. It may look like protest for some people. It may look like friendship to other people. It may look like just simply public acknowledgement, using of language, may be critical ways to move the needle. But the needle has moved, and this Constitution has survived as it's moved and has the potential to do so again. But we have to believe in it. We have to believe that these guardrails are important. We have to believe that you can raise them in new contexts and have them worked on and cared about. I talk a little bit about the case that I worked on that challenged the constitutionality of drug testing pregnant women and turning those results over to the police. This is a case that came out of Charleston. If you want to look it up, it's Ferguson versus the city of Charleston. But I think everybody that I talked to about this case when I was working on it, they thought it was a drug case. They thought it was a pregnancy case. It wasn't really either one. It's a Fourth Amendment case. It was a search and seizure case. It was, can you force people to turn over evidence when they haven't consented and there isn't a warrant? It was very clear and straightforward, and our search and seizure law is pretty strong and pretty established. But nobody had bothered to think about it in terms of pregnant women in this particular context. And it was so hard in that case to get the court to focus on the abuse of power as opposed to the notion that somehow or another we were saving people by doing this, even though the science behind that didn't even show that it was good medicine or good public health. But I got to experience in that case the difficulty it was to keep the focus on what the Constitution actually provided, that people didn't think about the fact that health information being turned over to the police was the same as breaking down the door of a house, that you have the abilities to make these sorts of analogies demand that we keep being creative, that we keep seeing what is there, and keep noticing when there's an overreach of power. And it's kind of interesting when you experience it yourself, you sort of know it. But it's very hard as a community to keep in touch with those values that are enshrined in the Constitution. And the Constitution really gives us some guardrails that keep the government in line. And that the Constitution was designed to give certain powers to the government, to keep the rest of the powers away from them. To keep the powers, so it's the zone that belongs to us as individuals and communities is only going to be as strong as we insist that it still be there. We insist on our integrity, our independence, our privacy, even though that seems to be not very valued, but it's valued in some contexts and not in others. It's sometimes very confusing to me how you can resist vaccination, but you can force someone to carry a pregnancy. How are these, what? What are the same? But the Constitution may not be perfect, but it gives us the tools to raise some of these issues in specific sorts of ways, but also in ways that grow as we grow as a community. Even though there's not a direct line there, but it really does make a difference. And some of these things that have changed in the Constitution have changed in kind of weird ways, that have done things that we didn't really expect them to. But they have, and the cases still are, they're still there, and there's precedent there. And I think that there is a critical need to pay attention to what the Supreme Court does, and to pay attention to how Supreme Court justices get chosen. Also to pay attention to what's taught in law school. They're all important things to be paying attention to, but we are doing that. Sitting here today, you are doing that. And it's important that you care about the Constitution. It's important that you care about the limitations of police power, that you care about the importance of voting and protecting the vote. Because it's not things we can take for granted. We've never been able to take for granted. It's always required a certain fight. But I'm still one of these people who believe that the arc of history moves. It may have some blips in it, but the baseline has moved significantly since the Constitution was written. And we as a country and communities have moved with it, and can keep doing so if we keep believing in the power of people and the integrity of people and the human rights of people. Okay, so we'll open it up now.
Let me just add one last thing, tagging on to what Susan said. In a democracy, there's a tension. On one hand, you want to have the will of the people as much as possible. On the other hand, you have to make sure that in certain situations, the will of the people does not wind up taking advantage of some people by searching them, invading them, or oppressing certain kinds of people. But I believe that the will of the people as a whole goes in that sense toward justice and freedom and equality. And even when the Constitution seems to be being wielded by certain people in a way to try to take advantage of other people, when they're trying to, when on one hand the Supreme Court says, oh, you can pour all the money you want into an election to drown out the voice of the people, and when they then go ahead and say, and yes, gerrymandering is perfectly fine, the legislature can do whatever it wants to rig elections. That is not the ultimate. I think the will of the people is something that we keep working on and keeps coming up. We didn't start with women voting, black people voting. We didn't start with handicapped people having rights. It was the will of the people over a period of time toward justice and toward humanity. And that's what we have to keep exercising and expressing, and hoping that the true will of the people as a sign of goodness will emerge and will triumph.
Yeah, and I think I would throw in another little piece, that it's not just the will of the people, but also sometimes facts make a difference. Oh, heaven forbid. But the Brown versus Education, was a case about segregation, but underlying that case was factual information that was presented in the lower courts and then reviewed, which actually proved the effects of separate but equal, not being separate but equal. That was actually a provable sort of fact, and that we get so that we can prove and see and learn bit by bit that does make a difference.
And we talk about no kings. That's one of the themes of today, I guess. But there is a king. There's a king of England. But the will of the people has now made the king of England fire the Duke of York.
When we let Santos out of jail. Go figure.
So even kings can have to bow to the will of the people.
Sometimes. Okay, we're going to open it up for questions, and we've got our Vanna Whites are going to run around with the mic. It's a good South Carolina tradition.
Thank you so much for this. It's really powerful. And Susan, your point about the power being the thing we need to organize ourselves around is a really important one. Because it feels to me like one of the things that's happening is that justice is now being perceived as random, and law is becoming something people don't put their faith in. And that's really scary. And there's a piece of the story about the Ferguson case that I think is also instructive, which was when they wouldn't respond and change their program, you and Lynn Paltrow got together and raised a question about whether they should continue to get their national health funding. And when that got threatened, they changed their practice. And I think that reminds us all, or at least for me, it reminds me that if we can organize and we can think about how we want the world to be and communicate that in a way that ultimately gets recognized as a constitutional argument, then I think that's the role we can play. And I just really appreciate both of you being here and doing that. So
Yeah, and I think what you point out is that they're lawsuits, but the lawsuits can't be our only tool.
right.
They can't be our only. This is not work just for lawyers.
And we also need to fight the notion that the law means nothing, because I certainly have gotten there. And I have to constantly remind myself, I mean, I was a law professor. I don't believe in the law anymore. And that's a very scary place to be.
I was going to say, it may be a little bit like, remember when God was dead? You know, I think that we're having that same feeling about law, is that we now have to see it in a different light, but it's probably not dead.
Testing.
What most concerns me, among many things that concern me now, is misuse of the president's power as commander-in-chief. It seems like the Constitution gives him a lot of leeway there. And if you have a submissive Congress and a submissive courts, and right now a president that seems to be removing top people in the military who might push back, and abusing the use of the National Guard, sending Marines here and there throughout the country. How can the institutions push back? How can the citizens push back? That, to me, is very scary.
It is scary when other institutions or people who are supposed to be part of checks and balances are removed. And in the short run, there may be no answer. But times change, things happen. What we see today may be very different from what we see tomorrow. And frankly, it may be some factors that we have no control over. For example, this president thinks he can lower the interest rate and lower the inflation rate at the same time. That does not seem to be possible. And part of the problem we have is we have 80 million people who thought at one point that this president was going to do some good things, and so they put the power in his hands. We are now watching what happens when so much power goes into the hands of one person. But we have to think that I'm not sure where I get the faith, but I have to believe that things that I have to believe that this country, which has survived so many problems, so many times when Dan Doyle was talking about how this country almost did not survive the Civil War. If General McClellan had won the 1864 election, we wouldn't have a country today. I have to think that the innate strength that has kept this country going for 200 years is going to prevail over the efforts, even though they seem like extraordinary efforts and extraordinarily successful so far, of one man and the extraordinary surrender of the other branches of government. I have to believe that in the end, the will of the people will survive all that. Where I get that faith, I'm not sure, because I'm not a God-fearing person, but I just have to believe. In the end, I was watching the movie Tale of Two Cities the other night. In the end, the French Revolution, the Reign of Terror did not survive. Napoleon did not survive. I have to believe that we will come through this dark night too.
And I guess that I also believe that eventually incompetence will be obvious. And, you know, the truth of the matter is that military are notoriously bad at law enforcement. They just don't do it very well. They're not trained to do it. They don't know how to do it. And that will eventually become obvious, I hope. Yes.
I think so many of us are here because we are hopeless. And I'm not an attorney, but we met here, the very first Silence is Not an Option back in April. Myself and a couple of other people started Town Hall Now because we were so frustrated. We wanted to speak face to face with our representatives. So we rallied in front of Lindsey Graham's office for 6 to 8 weeks until it got insanely hot. And so he hasn't had a public town hall since 2017. And this is our senator. And I was shocked to learn that our representatives don't have to talk to us. They don't have to have town halls. And so how can we, especially those of us who are not attorneys, how can we, besides going and waving signs and flags, how can we be part of this conversation that seems to be happening without any of our voices?
Maybe faith is believing something when all logic tells you it's not true. The fact that those representatives have stopped coming to those town halls is a sign that they know that there's something to fear, that they are afraid to enter into those conversations. They do have these positions of power. They get elected to them. They get elected largely with huge amounts of money. But that's not necessarily enough protection for them, when the reason they don't come to the town halls is they can't get away with lies. That in itself shows some power that they have to be afraid of. And in a sense, part of it is hoping by the people who have the power now that the rest of us will go away, or will get discouraged, or will give up, or will just stay home. And so one of the things we have to do is to avoid those things. We have to stop. We have to not just stay home. We have to come here today and go to do the things you want to do. And for those of us who are of an age, we have to make sure that the younger people, that we talk to the younger people, that we give the younger people a picture that things don't have to be the way they seem to be going today. Once upon a time, we know that things look differently. Most of us lived through lifetimes when we thought things were getting better over a period of time. Now we're in a period where it looks like things are not getting better and may not get better. But we have to have faith, and we have to give the younger people some reason to think that things can get better.
Well, and I have to point out, think of how long the African Americans in this country didn't think they were being heard. And they kept believing. They knew they were right. They knew they were human. They couldn't take no for an answer. But they didn't immediately get heard. It didn't immediately get heard. But that was a long process. And if they had hope, we can have hope.
I hope I can organize these thoughts, but I think that it's interesting, kind of some of the things you were saying about being human, what it is to be human. And then we also think about Citizens United, which gave corporations a voice that they believe is equal to my voice as a human, because the Roberts Court has also stripped away our voting. I mean, it's recognized that we don't have a constitutional amendment to vote like that. That's, as individuals, I think we have the ability, but I don't know there's not the right to vote for things, which is kind of parts of the right to protest. But I wanted to kind of get to this connection between AI, which I think part of what's happened in our recent election was it's really easy for big corporations to go have a dinner at the White House than it is to have to lobby. Like, it's kind of complicated to lobby all these different people, and they don't want to lobby all the different states. They see that's a problem, so they're really focusing on the power of this one person, the president. And it seems like what they're lobbying for is their voice, and that voice is now a voice that comes on my computer and says, "Hi, Julie, how can I help you today?" When the I is AI, wanting to be an actual individual. So I'm a little concerned that this idea of corporations as individuals are stepping on, and the right that they have to free speech and the right they have as individuals has gone so extreme that they literally believe that they are now, can refer to themselves as I and me as...
I defer.
No, seriously, you go.
No, I do think that it's a real problem when something that is not a sentient being gets treated as if they were a citizen or person. I think that's a real bad decision, and just doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense. I mean, how can a corporation have a religion? You know, how does a corporation have? They don't have a religion. They're a thing. But that's something that has yet to be sorted out. I think. But I just think it just doesn't make sense to most people. It doesn't make sense to me.
If you're talking about corporations as really, yeah, I've always wondered also, where does the corporation go to church? The Hobby Lobby case of a couple of years ago said that because one of the members of a corporation had a particular religious belief, that was that allowed them to override the health care of their employees. And now we have, what do we have? In Tennessee, or the Supreme Court says that Tennessee can trample on the rights and interests of families with transgender children, and that's fine for the Supreme Court. And then at the same time in another case, they say, but people who want to subject their children to conversion therapy and turn them into non-humans, that's perfectly okay, and the state can't interfere with that. So it's elevating religion to something monstrous, as it's just one of the sort of evil steps that people with power can take, which is another reason why we can't let them keep having that power. We're not giving any answers. We're not providing any prescriptions. I understand
I told you it'd be
that.
confusing.
We're just saying, I think, that the work has to go on.
Yeah.
The work has to go on.
Okay, Carl.
So what can we do about big money in politics and the law? I mean, there was a case in Rhode Island where big money decided they want a private home for a development, and it went all the way to the Supreme Court, said the state could take their property for development. It seems like, big money in all courts. I mean, they're taking, the president's taking people to court, and, the defense is going to cost them billions of dollars, and it's just, if you have enough money, you can win.
I mean, it is a problem, and the cost of our legal system is a real challenge. It's why organizations like the ACLU and the South Carolina Environmental Law, those public agencies become more and more important, because it's so hard for individuals to fight the big money. And that's true even down to little car accidents. I don't think it's something that the Constitution has much usefulness in terms of fixing. What do you think?
And you can't stop. Can't stop. And if there are things to be done, they have to be done. This letter that I'm going to write.
Yeah. Tell them about it.
Oh, yeah. Any of you have been in the airport, you've all heard about the airport. And there's a video that Kristi Noem, who's the Secretary of Homeland Security, has this video in which she says, sorry that there's no air traffic controllers around and your plane is probably going to go down in the ocean, but it's because the Democrats have kept the government shut down. So that seems to be an outright violation of the Hatch Act that says government employees on government time and using government funds can't make partisan comments, can't do partisan work. And some airports have refused to show that video. Charleston Airport is, as far as I know, still showing it, although I think they may be turning off the volume. It's a violation of the Hatch Act. I mean, but they don't care. Part of the problem we have today is that the people who are in charge don't care about the law. So I've drafted a short letter, and I'm planning to send it to the Charleston the Airport Authority, saying, please stop. This is a violation of the Hatch Act. And if you don't stop, I'm going to take further legal action. Well, the further legal action may not...
It might be a letter to the editor. Yeah.
The further legal action may not make much difference, because you apply to something called the special counsel, and if the special counsel agrees, then it goes to the Merit System Protection. So these are all federal officials who I'm sure will be fired if they rule in our favor. But it's worth doing.
And if you want to sign on to the letter, there's a sign-on sheet back on the black table in the back.
It's a very simple letter. This is the same Secretary of Homeland Security who goes around killing her dogs, you remember. But, so we just have to keep on. We don't have any choice. We don't have any choice.
I'll stand up. I am so excited. I just got a note. You maybe heard my phone go ding ding. My daughter and her partner are on their way to Columbia for No Kings. So I want to say yay to my daughter. I came here 6 years ago from Montgomery County, Maryland, and for 12 years there, I was the president of the Board of Elections, and I put my heart and soul. I was appointed by 3 governors to do that. It was it was an appointment job, so it was not part of any Hatch Act or anything. And all of us who were board presidents in the counties took this heart and soul to read what was called COMAR, the Code of Maryland. There is a Code of South Carolina, too, for elections. And I think people don't care about the rules anymore. That's all we did as board members. We did all the rules and regulations. We knew the Code of Maryland was so large that I had to memorize the table of contents to know what I was doing. And we had a lawyer present at all times. And yes, we did put people in jail. So I'm just about the judicial branch now. What is going on with the right to vote? Will we no longer have a right to vote? Will other parties be making the rules up as we go along? Do we have a code that matters? So that is my big question, and I'm just proud to say that Jamie Raskin was my neighbor and my representative, and we had a great big civic center with a patio out in front where hundreds of people would come, and he would say, someone mentioned, why don't we have more, discourse with our, and he would call them, so we would have, hundreds of people could show up. So anyway, I'm rambling on, but I just am so worried about what's going on nationally and locally about.
And I'd have to say, at the ground level in South Carolina, the elections are very well run. People are very well trained, and there are clear codes and that sort of thing. Whether some of the craziness at the top is going to come down to the local level remains to be seen. But it's certainly the process in South Carolina, for a variety of different reasons, has not been as politicized as some other states. So we've got a little bit of a leg up there.
Hi there. I want to give some action steps. I'm a nurse, I'm a mother, I'm a grief educator, and a bereaved parent. So the only thing we can do to take action is everybody should have the app. It's called 5 Calls. It will give you scripts and phone numbers of our local representatives, and in the Capitol, call every day. Because all these people want to get elected again. They can't do it. I mean, if they take away our vote, they take away our vote. But until that happens, we do have a voice. And the reason you can keep faith is because it has worked in the past. And if you take action and you talk to your friends, I can't tell you how many people I tried to get here today who had other plans, including my husband. Okay? Some of them are good, some not so much. Okay, but we need to inspire those people. You need to feel that your voice will be heard, but you have to take action. You need to show up anyway, anywhere you can, at any time, for your values. And if you don't care, well, then whatever's going to happen is going to happen. But do get that app. It's really critical.
And just vote with your dollar or not buying things, right? That's what hurts them a lot. So
Since this administration took place, I have not shopped at any single store that doesn't support DEI. So many people don't even understand that DEI is not only about race, it's about equality for handicapped people. I have multiple handicapped people in my family. I work with handicapped people. This is what you do. And you follow Sino and you follow other groups that give you action steps that allow you to feel that you actually moving the agenda forward. Thank you for your time.
So I was appointed by the South Carolina Senate and elected by the South Carolina Senate and appointed by the governor to serve on the Charleston International Airport Board from 2014 to 2019. Lady, ma'am, please don't leave. Ma'am, excuse me, please don't leave, because I want to give you an action step, something that's easy to do. So, Armand, I'm so excited that you've done this petition, that you're going to ask the airport board to, or TSA, or whoever they think is responsible, whoever Elliott thinks is responsible for it, to take that down. The reason that I come to these meetings is because silence is not an option. And I think those things about making phone calls is important. What I know from my own personal career is that change is local. And this thing at the airport is a great time for this group to make a difference. And I'm going to give you 2 ways to do it. All right? One is go on the internet, look up I Fly Charleston, and get the names of the aviation board members and call them. Helen Hill, who is a dear friend of ours, who's head of Explore Charleston, the Convention and Visitors Bureau, she is the chair and the most influential person in this community. So call Helen first. The second thing is they meet monthly. The board meets monthly at the airport. It is a public meeting. They have an open forum. Go to the meeting, shake hands with each of the Aviation Authority board members, tell them who you are, why you're there, and stay for the meeting and have a representative speak and have you stand. I don't want 100 people speaking on the same thing. That is the way, in addition to what you're doing, Armin, is a way that this group can affect change that will, in fact, make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm not sure how you can relate this to the Constitution, but one of my frustrations is trying to speak with people who are not, I hate to say on my side, but just don't get it, how to educate people. And do either of you have any suggestions? I mean, I just feel like we're talking about protesting and bringing more people into the protests, and I feel like we can bring some people in, but I don't know quite how to do that. And I'm sorry if this is a little off topic, if you don't have an answer, I understand.
Well, I don't know if it's anything Armin and I have any expertise in, but I guess that I guess one of the things that I think in a situation like that is to just forget about who's on what side and who's on, but to make your circle as wide as you can, to contact talk to the people at the grocery store, just the more people you have contact with, the more opportunities you're going to have to share what you feel about things and think about things. It doesn't have to be an argument, it doesn't have to be a debate, it doesn't have to be, whatever. And you end up doing stupid things, but I'm kind of a great believer in bumper stickers. Putting what you feel out in a public sort of way so that your neighbors see it, that the people see it, that you stop at the traffic light with. That's just a small thing, but there are ways that you can sort of state, this is who I am, this is what I believe, and at least people will know that. They'll have the opportunity to have seen that. So,
Sign-o bumper stickers
not
are
very.
coming. Sign-o bumper stickers will be available sometimes very soon.
You got to.
I'm not sure that a lot of the people who brought this administration into power are feeling very comfortable about what's going on, and it may or may not be worth reminding them or bringing it up, but I have to think that there's a lot of people out there who say, I voted for Trump, but bringing George Santos back, commuting his sentence, and firing all these generals, and this and that.
And stopping provided services for special needs children.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of people out there making decisions that we read about who are doing truly evil things. But I'm not sure that the people who put them in power there really bought into or thought they were buying all the evil things that are happening.
Jennifer.
So first, I would like to thank both of you for being here and speaking to us. This is very special to me, to be honest, to have a space to come to and sit with like-minded people and hear the ideas. I just want to say, as a person that did not live through the civil rights movement, I grew up with friends, and I thought it was going to be great. And this is really depressing. I really struggle sometimes to not go down the drain pipe. But something I've heard is that progress is inevitable. And like you said, the faith. And I appreciate you saying that. And I appreciate all of you that have been in this fight much longer than I have and have been doing the good fight. And I want to encourage you to keep doing that and keep talking to younger people and keep talking to just all of us about your experiences and what you went through and how you did it. That really, really matters because we haven't had to fight as hard and to live through this. And so I understand, and I completely agree with you, Susan, on the African Americans that have been fighting for so very long. And if they can do it, we can absolutely do it. And last thing, so I wanted to talk about the town hall. I saw recently that somebody ran a town hall without the person, without the elected official. They just did it. And people brought their questions and they posed the question to the elected official and gave them the opportunity to answer those questions, even via text or email or whatever. And I think we need to keep, and don't get me wrong, this is hard for me because sometimes I just want to go on my back porch and scream and rant and rave, but that's not going to bring anyone onto our boats. We need to do this and to find that community and find that joy and bring that forward. And and keep having that faith. And I'm not saying that's easy, but please, and please keep teaching us, and please just keep giving us your wisdom. I really, really appreciate it. So thank you for doing this.
What wisdom?
I want to thank Jane Aiken, and I want to thank everybody that has come today and has been coming to these meetings. I know that before I got that original email to show up at the Circular Church for the very first Sino meeting, I was at a complete loss as to what to do. I felt defeated. I just didn't know what to do. And I felt depressed too, and I felt, defeated. But what I've found since we moved Sino forward is that all of these grassroots organizations that used to compete against each other are all working together now. Everybody is creating a bigger, stronger community, and it takes each of us bringing in one new person each time and, bringing them to a meeting, bringing them to a rally. Thank goodness somebody stood up front here and said, okay, we got to get our acts together. We got to do something. We got to move forward. And I really see that happening. And I see these meetings, full of people on a gorgeous Saturday, where people are out protesting right now. But, there are enough people that care about the Constitution and care about this community. And I would say keep bringing people in because it's working. It is working. It's slow. It's not going to be tomorrow, but feel the love, feel the unity. We're not doing this by ourselves anymore. We're here together.
I have a question about the Constitution.
Oh.
I didn't understand why the Supreme Court thought it was all right to say gerrymandering is all right, because I figured one person, one vote was what we were aspiring to. And now in Louisiana, there's another question that's before the Supreme Court in which they're saying that it's not all right to gerrymander for race. Now, can you explain to me why one way it's all right, and now they're thinking that it isn't all right?
I hate to say this. I think there is no honest explanation for what the U.S. Supreme Court has done. It's actually worse than you say, because the Supreme Court says racial gerrymandering is unconstitutional, but partisan gerrymandering, that is gerrymandering for political advantage, they can't do anything about it. They say, we're not going to deal with that, but we do say that racial gerrymandering is unconstitutional. But then what the Supreme Court has done is take a case of racial gerrymandering, which was the case of our first congressional district, and say, and when our local district court, Judge Gergel and 2 other judges, said that was racial gerrymandering and therefore unconstitutional, and the Supreme Court, U.S. Supreme Court, said, oh, no, that wasn't racial gerrymandering, that was political gerrymandering. And the reason we know that, said the U.S. Supreme Court, is that the legislative leaders who were drafting the plan said from the beginning that we have a goal, in addition to equal population and other things, we have a goal of helping Nancy Mace or helping Republicans win the first congressional district. They said that from the beginning, according to the U.S. Supreme Court. And that's in the opinion. And that's one of the linchpins of the Supreme Court's decision that it was political gerrymandering, partisan gerrymandering, and therefore okay, and not racial gerrymandering. The problem is that statement is just not true. The Supreme Court rested its opinion on a sentence that's absolutely false. The legislative leaders never said that they were trying to help the Republican Party in the first congressional district. The Supreme Court says they said it. It's not true. So the Supreme Court rested its decision allowing the gerrymandering here, the racial gerrymandering, they rested their decision that it was okay because it was a political gerrymandering on just a flat lie. So I, for one, I hate to say this, but I, for one, have no faith in the Supreme Court giving us an honest decision in Louisiana or in any other case involving voting. I'm sorry to come to that conclusion, but I just have lost all my faith in the honesty of the Supreme Court majority.
But I think it is really important to notice that the gerrymandering problem has been a problem for a long time, but there have been communities that have taken charge of this and have taken the power to draw the lines away from politicians and given them to independent commissions that are designed to draw fair as opposed to I win districts. So there are other ways. There are other ways to crack this nut if the Supreme Court is refusing to act like it has the power to protect the vote.
And most people of goodwill think that partisan gerrymandering is not fair, is not decent, is not democratic. And so it's important to make the people who want to do it, it's important to make them realize what they're doing and hope that there will be a sense of shame and a sense of embarrassment. And that's always been the way it was in the past. Legislators in the past never admitted that they were engaging in partisan gerrymandering because it's sort of a dirty business. Everybody recognizes it's a dirty business. We can't let them think it's normal or acceptable. It's not. It's crooked. Partisan gerrymandering is crooked. That's all it is.
Yeah, regardless of which party does it. it is sort of, if you get to the point where you're admitting that that's what you're doing, that it may help motivate the people, the will of the people to say, this is not the way we want our country run. So. I'm not turning into a pumpkin. How about you?
This meeting is important work. We appreciate everybody being here.
Am I on? I
Yeah.
guess. Two things. It's easy for many of us to go down the rabbit hole of powerlessness. And I'm grateful for your words of encouragement to have patience and faith. And I did want to address the corporations being considered humans. It's really, I read this week by one of my journalists from Substack, Jay Kuo, K-U-O, who is an attorney, and he said that states grant the right to corporations to run, and certain states can say that they shouldn't be looked at as humans. Now, I don't know if that will fly, certainly not in our state, but, you know, I just wondered about the validity of such a statement.
Well, I don't really know, but the whole process of incorporation is it's made up. It's artificial, so it seems to me if you can make it up one way, you can make it up another way. It does seem to me that just in terms of the way commerce works in the United States, it's going to be really complicated for one state to have one thing and another. Yeah, but the state of Delaware has always played by its own game with corporations, right?
Yeah.
So
sometimes corporations are better than government people.
Hi, I wanted to thank you, number one. And everybody here, I know we all kind of have that sort of pall of hopelessness, but I do believe it's going to get worse before it gets better, but it is going to get better. And my father was an admiral in the Navy. I said to my brother last week at that meeting that if Dad is going to rise, it's going to be today, so you might as well check. But everything that he taught me growing up about democracy and that we all sign on, we all agree that we're going to be living by certain codes, and that's what's falling apart right now. I do believe gerrymandering is such a key thing, but Eric Holder has been working for years, I think, for a nationwide opportunity to vote in anti-gerrymandering federally across the board. I think we will get to that at some point, and then a lot of these other things will fall into place. But one of the things, the Supreme Court drives me nuts, and I've had arguments with people as far as how many justices should there be. And I actually got into this argument with my husband that I think there should be 13 because it should reflect the amount of the appellate circuits. I'm not a lawyer, but it seemed like that might be a good way to do it. And I also thought term limit, have an 18-year term, and I was shocked that the salary is so low for a Supreme Court justice. Maybe pay them $1 million a year for those 18 years, so then Harlan Crow and those people, you're not quite as dependent upon them or want them as your best friend. I just wanted your opinion on that.
Let me just say this. In 1928, actually for most of 1929, Herbert Hoover had a sky-high approval rating. And then came the Depression, and that led to 40 years of change in this country. We've benefited a lot from those 40 years. Sometimes things are unpredictable. So in addition to working, organizing, all those things, we also have to have a little bit of hope for the unpredictable.
Okay.
I was just going to say thank you for helping us end on a hopeful note, and that I think since we're wrapping up, that we need to end on a hopeful note. And I would say that also people should give money to the ACLU and to Mark Elias's organizations and others that are trying to use the law to preserve the Constitution and above all, our voting rights. And the second thing is, in one way, Trump's going to help us, and that is he's going to piss off more people every day, and our numbers, as we go out and demonstrate, are going to grow. We do have elections coming up, and if all those aforementioned groups and all of us keep insisting that we have that, great. And in the meantime, we do what we're doing today. We gather, we march, we encourage others not to give up, and hopefully that will build momentum until the midterm elections, and that we will, while we're waiting for some miracle like you just mentioned, Armin, we'll do what we can, and in the meantime, take comfort from each other and being among like-minded people, and just keep building that momentum until we can get out to the polls, and then make sure that we and everyone we can bring with us takes advantage of that right. That's right. It took 72 years for the women's rights movement to succeed.
Sino will gather again here on the 15th of November. Is that yeah, 15th of, and the issue then will be about science, but there'll also be kind of after the science presentation, there'll be a membership meeting where we'll talk about some sort of details of the organization itself. And there'll be pop-ups on November 9th, so anybody who's thought about the pop-ups, interested in the pop-ups, there's a sheet that you can sign, the yellow sheet back there, if you want to make sure you get direct information about which locations and that sort of thing for the 9th. Sign up on the yellow sheet and we'll get it right to you.
And also, please check all of your folders of your email for where our newsletter is going. Mine shows up in promotions. And half the time you won't even know it's coming. And I try to send them out several times a month. So just please keep an eye on your different folders, including trash, unfortunately. We were hoping everybody would come up front and stand on the stairs, and we wanted to take a picture of the group with Susan and Armand, if that's okay with y'all.
Let me just say this one last thing. Most of us in this room are living okay. We're not just doing this for ourselves. We owe it to our grandchildren, our children, our grandchildren, and their children. And as our president has said several times, if we don't do certain things, we won't have a country anymore. That's what it's all about.
Susan, can you all just stay in the chair? And we'll sit in front of you. We're staying here.
We're staying here.
We're staying here.
Okay.